Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world, and welcome to this Henley & Partners Global Webcast Series event. The topic for today's webcast is a limited window of opportunity, important changes to the Australia and New Zealand residence by investment programs. My name is Tony Leneves. I'm the Managing Partner of Henley & Partners in Australia, and I'll be talking today about Australia's Global Talent Program and also a new program the Australian Government is launching later this year, the National Innovation Visa. Joining me for today's discussion is my colleague, Karen Justice from Henley & Partners in New Zealand. Karen's a licensed immigration advisor, and she'll be discussing investor migration to New Zealand with a particular focus on the Active Investor Plus program. I'm also pleased to have Tim Crawford joining us today. So Tim is a senior investment advisor with New Zealand financial services firm Forsyth Barr. He'll be giving us the benefit of his experience and providing some insights into the current investment landscape in New Zealand. So as with all Henley & Partners webcasts, we'll leave some time at the end of our presentations to answer any questions you might have. If you do have a question, please just type it into the Q&A section at the bottom of your screen, and we'll deal with those questions at the end. This webcast is also being recorded, and the recording will be made available to all those who've registered for the event. And of course, we'll also provide our contact details should you wish to schedule a one-on-one discussion with any of us later on. Okay, so let's get started. For those of you who are new to Henley & Partners, Henley & Partners is a citizenship and residence advisory firm. And in fact, we are the global leader in citizenship and residence by investment. 30 years ago, we pioneered the investment migration industry, and our footprint is now truly global. We have 55 offices around the world, and our staff advise clients on more than 40 investment migration options. Of course, today we are focusing on just two of those options, the Australian program and the New Zealand program. But private client advisory is just one part of what Henley & Partners does. The other part of our business, the other side of our business, is government advisory. So over the past almost 3 decades, we've advised multiple governments on the design, the setup, and the implementation of some of the world's most successful investment migration programs. But through our government advisory practice, we've helped governments generate more than $12 billion in foreign direct investment. So this map shows the location of Henley & Partners offices around the world, and you can see that we're located in the major source markets such as the US, Asia and Africa, as well as in the major residence and citizenship destination countries in North America, Europe, the Caribbean, and the Asia Pacific. At Henley & Partners, we provide our clients with a complete end-to-end hand-holding experience. So no matter where you're located in the world or which residence or citizenship program you're considering, we have someone on the ground where you are to help you with advice and to ensure that your application has the best chance of success. So if you're an entrepreneur and you're in LA and you're looking at residence in the UAE, for example, we have client advisors in LA to help you with that part of the process. And we have offices on the ground in Dubai to help with your application. And likewise, if you're working in the IT industry in India, we have client advisors there to talk to you. And we also have, and if you're interested in the Global Talent Program in Australia, my team in Australia can help you with your Global Talent Visa application. I mentioned before that our staff can advise on more than 40 investment migration options. And this slide just lists the leading residence and citizenship programs around the world today. And these are all available through your Henley & Partners client advisors. Okay, I'd like now to move on to Australia and give you some information about the program that is currently available, and also some information about changes that are coming a little bit later in the year. So when I do these presentations, I regularly get asked why Australia is consistently in the top 5 destinations globally for investors and for high net worth migration generally. Well, they are just some of the reasons. Some other reasons would be, our climate, our standard of living. Obviously, it's a multicultural society. Our location, close to the growing economies of in Asia. Also, we're a long way from global hotspots at the moment, which is very attractive. I guess probably the number one driver for our clients, our high net worth clients, is the education system. And you can see we've listed there the high quality education and healthcare. The Australian education system is a major export earner for Australia. In fact, at any given time, there are around about 400,000 international students living and studying in Australia. So the English education system here is a major reason why people choose Australia as a destination. And that final point there as well is also very, very relevant to high net worth migrants. Australia has no gift tax, it has no estate tax, it has no wealth taxes. All right, so moving on to the Australian Global Talent Independent Program. So what is the Global Talent Independent Program? It's a program designed and implemented in 2019, firstly as a pilot program, then it became a regular part of the migration program in the years after that. It provides a streamlined pathway to permanent residence for highly skilled executives, entrepreneurs, professionals, business people, and so on. It was designed to help grow our innovation and tech economies and to bring skills into Australia and transfer those skills to the Australian workforce. Actually, Global Talent is not technically an investor program, and that's because there's no investment required for Global Talent. There's no contribution at all required for that program. There's also no age limit, but it is more difficult to qualify for Global Talent if you're over the age of 55. And the reason for that is because 55 is the minimum retirement age in Australia, and the government here is really looking for people who are going to become part of the economy and not come here to retire. You can apply if you're over 55, it just becomes more difficult for us to secure you a visa. As I mentioned, it's a direct route to permanent residence. So as soon as your Global Talent visa is granted, you and your family, your dependents will all be permanent residents of Australia. It's a very attractive option because it's direct to permanent residence, a very attractive option for people who want to put their children into education here. And the reason is because once you've got permanent residence, your children can attend school, college, university in Australia, and the fees are the same as paid by any other Australian citizen or permanent resident. You don't have to deal with international student fees. You don't have to deal with student visa applications. You can enrol like any other Australian. The processing time for Global Talent Program at the moment, 6 to 9 months from the time you contact us to when your permanent resident visa is granted. The government's working to bring that processing time down. It has been longer than that. 6 to 9 months is what we're seeing currently. Okay, the government through the Global Talent Program is looking to find the best and brightest global talent around the world. And to do that, they've nominated these 10 future-focused industry sectors. So in order to qualify, you need to be involved in one of these industry sectors in some capacity, either working in one of those sectors, you might be an academic in one of those areas, you might have a business that operates in that area. At Henley & Partners, we've assisted clients in all of those sectors, but I would say the number one for us would be financial services and fintech, followed by digitech, health industries, education and energy. But we can help you if you're involved in any of those industry sectors. Okay, so how do you qualify for a Global Talent visa? First of all, as the primary applicant, you must have an international reputation in your field. You must be able to provide evidence of outstanding achievements over your career, and those achievements might include that you've worked in senior roles, you have some patents if you're a business owner, you may have received professional awards, you might be published, you may have done media interviews, whatever it is about your profile that makes you stand out from others in the same field. In your application, you have to provide evidence that you would be an asset to Australia in your area of expertise and have no difficulty obtaining employment if you're an employee, or becoming established in your field if you're self-employed. The third point there about nomination, I'll go into that a little bit more in a bit more detail in a moment. Enough to say here that you do need to be nominated for this visa, and the nomination can be from a recognised organisation in Australia or an individual in the same field as you. And there are some places available to PhD graduates and certain PhD students who are nearing the end of their thesis, provided their study and their PhD studies are in one of those 10 industry sectors. Okay, why would you use us? Why would you use Henley & Partners to help you with your global talent visa application? Well, for a start, we have relationship managers in all of our offices to help you with the application. Your dedicated relationship manager will oversee the whole process from start to finish to make sure your application has the greatest chance of success. To do that, we've partnered with a professional resume writing service here in Australia. They will rewrite your resume and your statement of eligibility, your supporting statement of eligibility, to make sure it meets all of the requirements of the GTI program. That's built into our process. Now, I mentioned before about the requirement to have a nominator. At Henley & Partners, we'll find that nominator for you. Most other companies doing this work won't do that. They'll simply tell you there's a nomination requirement and ask you to find someone to nominate you. At Henley's, we'll find you a nominator. Of course, if you know someone in Australia or you've had contact with someone in Australia through your work or your study who can nominate you, who you believe might be able to nominate you, you're free to provide their information to us, and we'll do some assessment and see whether we think they would be an appropriate nominator. But if you don't know anyone here, not a problem, we will help you find a nominator. Obviously, we prepare your expression of interest for the program and lodge that with the Department of Home Affairs and liaise with them to ensure you get your invitation to apply. Once you've been invited to apply, our team will prepare and submit your Global Talent Independent Visa application. But our work doesn't stop at that point. We don't just say, well, we've lodged your application, good luck. We stay with you the whole way through the application until it's finalised, because there are other requirements that come along, such as the health and character requirements. We'll help you when the time comes to set up those appointments or get those documents as they're required. And because we do all of that for our clients, our success rate with Global Talent is 100%. We've lodged well over 100 of these visa applications in the last few years. We've not had one refuse, and so we're very, very proud to say that our success rate is still 100%. Okay, that's the Global Talent Program. Another program I just want to touch on briefly. This is coming at the end of the year, the National Innovation Visa, or NIV. The Australian Government announced this last month as part of our budget announcement. And the government announced that the National Innovation Visa will in fact replace the current Global Talent Visa. They've announced that it will happen late this year. We don't have an exact date. We're imagining it will be sometime in Q4 of 2024, but it will replace the Global Talent Visa, but it won't be hugely different to the current program. It will retain much of the same eligibility requirements. The National Innovation Visa will still target exceptionally talented migrants who are able to drive growth in sectors of national importance. Those sectors might be the same sectors that I mentioned earlier, the industry sectors. They could change. There might be more sectors, there might be fewer sectors, but we'll just need to wait until we have the details. The visa will still provide a permanent residence pathway for exceptional and talented migrants. The government's actually highlighted high-performing entrepreneurs, major investors, and global researchers. Now, one area where it does differ a little from global talent is that the new National Innovation Visa is likely to have a stream for major investors. And this reflects the findings of the immigration review that the government undertook here in 2022 and 2023 that found that the old significant investor visa, Australia's $5 million visa, had some strengths to it. And so what they've done is they're adding a stream to the National Innovation Visa to allow for major investors to qualify. As I said, we don't yet have the details of the program. As soon as we do, of course, we'll make that information available to you through our client advisors around the world. And just finally there to note that the government has allocated 4,000 places for the 2024-25 program year for the National Innovation Visa. Okay, very briefly, I just want to mention another point, the closure of the old Business Innovation, Business Investment and Immigration Program. That will close. We don't have a date for when that will close, but it will be probably September of this year. It was not unexpected, the announcement of the closure of the BIP. That program hasn't been accepting new applicants for well over 12 months. So we weren't surprised when the government announced that they would close it. Now, what does this mean if you've already applied? Well, the government have said if you have applied for the program and you want to leave your application in the processing pipeline, you can do that. But because there'll be very few places available, you might be waiting a long, long time for a decision. The government have said because of the fact that the program is closing, they're going to offer applicants who've applied the opportunity to withdraw their application and get a refund of their application fee. That's likely to happen from September this year. And then finally, what if you're in the middle part of the processing of the BIP? The old Business Innovation and Investor Program was a two-stage program. You applied, you got your provisional visa and major investment. You waited 4 years and then you applied for a permanent visa. So what if you're in the middle? You've got the 188 visa, but you haven't yet made the application for the permanent visa. Well, for you, nothing will change. You'll still be able to make that application and your application will still be decided under the current eligibility requirements. All right, so that's enough about Australia. I'm now going to hand over to my colleague Karen Justice from Henleys in New Zealand, and Karen's going to take you through the Active Investor Plus program.
Thanks, Tony, much appreciated. So yes, as Tony mentioned earlier, I'm a licensed immigration advisor based in New Zealand in the beautiful South Island. I'm just going to give you a brief overview of the New Zealand program or equivalent for, as Tony's outlined, for Australia. So we are located very close to Australia, at the bottom of the world. We are similar to Australia, we are consistently ranked very highly in terms of ease of doing business, business transparency, and essentially protecting investors. So we enjoy a very high standard of living. Our politics are stable, and similar to Australia, due to our location, we're far away in the world from global hotspots. We enjoy a very multicultural population and very low population density. So our current population is just over 5 million, and geographically we are approximately the size of the UK. For citizenship, so I'm going to talk to you in a moment about residence and a residence visa, but citizenship is the status that will give you a New Zealand passport. People can become eligible for New Zealand citizenship after committing to live in New Zealand for 5 years as the holder of a resident and or a permanent resident visa. And I just want to take a moment to talk about the difference because we have both permanent resident visas and resident visas. And just to clarify, so between both resident and permanent resident visas will allow you the right to stay in New Zealand indefinitely. They will give you voting rights, they will give you access to public health care and access to the education system without the overseas fee-paying student visas. So that includes for children and at all levels of education up to university. The difference between the two is that the resident visa has an expiring travel component to it, which means your ability to come in and out of New Zealand. And if you come in under the Active Investor Plus program for New Zealand, you're given a residence visa from the outset, and that will have 5 years worth of travel conditions attached to it. At the end of the 4 years of investment, which I'll talk about shortly, you can apply to convert your residence visa to a permanent resident visa, which is a very straightforward application, and that will give you residence for life, essentially. You have no ongoing commitments to New Zealand. Obviously, we'd love for you to stay, but you can be away from the country for 10 years and still return and take up that resident status if you wish. Our residence applications can include a partner. So one application will include a partner and dependent children aged up to 24. So they must not have had their 25th birthday at the time the application is lodged. If they then subsequently turn 25, that's not a problem. And partners are throughout all of our laws across the entire range. We recognise 3 types of relationships equally, and that is marital relationships, same-sex relationships, and also de facto or common law relationships. So that is helpful. We often get asked about same-sex relationships. It's not a problem. Finally, similar to Australia, we don't have any gift or estate or wealth tax. And we don't have a capital gains tax at this point in time. It has been discussed from time to time and kicked around by various political parties, but no one has had the nerve yet to actually introduce it. So we enjoy, for the most part, there are some exclusions in relation to property. We have no capital gains tax either. I think. So now I'm going to talk to you about the Active Investor Plus program. So this program has been in place in its current format since September 2022, so about 18 months or so. So a lot of the nuances and things are being flushed out, and it's working quite well. It has involved a second government department, New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, which is tasked with making New Zealand attractive on a global stage from a business and social perspective. And the program has really focused, compared to the earlier programs, it really focuses on the investment side of things. And Tim is going to talk about more on the investment part and what that entails after me. Essentially, the category requires a minimum investment of $5 million New Zealand, or approximately 3.5, I think at the current rate, $1 million US. It is so you have a sliding scale between 5 and 15 million New Zealand dollars, depending on your chosen type of investment. The process itself takes between 8 to 9 months, or it could actually take much faster for a motivated individual for processing from the time you start the process to the time you've got your residence visa. And the reason for the variation is that actual application processing initially with Immigration New Zealand is taking around 2 to 3 months. And then after that, you have a 6-month period or a window in which you must liquidate your nominated assets and transfer them to New Zealand and make an initial investment. Obviously, with that 6-month time frame, you can, this is your opportunity to speed up that process or to slow it down, whichever is more preferable, and you can obtain a further 6-month extension to that period of time as well. Just continuing in terms of the in New Zealand, we consistently are in top 10 passport index. We, same as Australia, I think both countries can access 190 countries currently visa free. So it is a great passport to have if you then go on to have citizenship. Because citizenship requires 5 years of residence in New Zealand for as a resident visa holder or a permanent resident visa holder, you can, if you move here at the start of your investment period, maintain that investment for 4 years, you've really only got 1 more year of residing here before you would become eligible for a New Zealand passport and citizenship. We don't have a cap on our numbers at this point in time for the visas. So at various times in the past, our investor program has had a cap, but currently there is no cap, and I don't see the government implementing one anytime soon. So if you meet the requirements, then you're invited to apply and make New Zealand your home. I'm going to talk a little bit about the actual requirements now. So as I mentioned, the requirement is to invest between $5 and $15 million New Zealand, or weighted equivalent, over the course of 4 years. And the weighted equivalent is important, and that's the weighted, there are 3 different types of, or 3 different categories of investment that you can make, and depending on which one you choose and the risk level associated with each of those groups, that will dictate the actual amount in real money that you need to invest. The funds do not need to be invested fully from the outset. They can be progressively invested. You can invest all up front and then just forget about it. But at a minimum, you're required to make a small investment in order to get the visa. And then by 18 months into your 4-year period, excuse me, you must be at least 50% invested. So you must have 7.5 million or weighted equivalent actively invested. And then by 36 months, you must be fully invested, and that full investment must be held for the remaining 12 months. You must be of good health and of good character. The reason for the health requirement is that you will gain access to our public health care from day 1 of your residence visa. So they're just checking to see whether there are any conditions that you might have that would cause an ongoing and undue cost burden to the system, because obviously in the most cases you wouldn't have been in New Zealand and contributing to the tax base. The residence requirement associated with this visa is 4 years, over the 4-year period of investment, the principal applicant must spend 117 days here, and that could be over a number of trips, or it could be in one long trip. Obviously, if you decide to move here, then it's going to be very easy to spend those 117 days here. The requirement to spend the day here is only applicable to the principal visa applicant. So there is some consideration from the outset about who will be the principal applicant in your application. And it's a good idea to do some planning if you're not intending to move here permanently straight away. If you're in a partnership, then the one partner who is going to be able to spend that time in New Zealand more easily is the best applicant, is the best person to be the principal applicant. All family members must come to New Zealand within the first 12 months of being granted their visa, and that's to activate the residence visas. But after that, the only obligation to spend any time in New Zealand rests with the principal visa holder only. There's also a required English language ability, and it's important to note that that is only on the main or the principal visa holder as well. That is at a reasonable level. It's to ensure that that you're able to have a good conversation in New Zealand, and it's set at an IELTS overall band score of 5. Or if you are more familiar with the TOEFL program, then it's a score of 35 or higher. There is ability for you, if you come from a English-speaking background, obviously there's no requirement to do a test, but also if you have spent some time, even if English is not your excuse me, first language, if you've spent some time studying or working in an English environment, then an argument can be put forward to try and negate the need to have to sit a test. The assets classes, Tim is going to talk about in a little bit more detail shortly, but essentially the three comprise of direct investments into approved businesses, so that's more private equity, and they perceive to be the highest risk and therefore have a weighting of 3. So for every $1 you invest, you're given credit for $3, and that is how you can only need to invest 5 million potentially if you choose that asset class. The middle group is approved managed funds, and they have a 2 weighting. So if you only invest in that group, your investment required is 7.5 million New Zealand dollars. And the third group has a 1-to-1 rating, and that is listed equities on our stock exchange and philanthropy. It's possible to mix and match, so you don't have to stick with one particular asset class to spread the risk. And we've got clients who have certainly invested only in direct investments for 5 million, but it's also possible, for example, to have listed equities and managed funds, for example, as a combination, or even direct investments and managed funds together. In terms of what happens at the end of your investment period, you've got 4 years, and after that 4 years has been completed, you're free. The funds are yours to do as you please, pending what you've invested in. But from an immigration perspective, they become not a requirement or an ongoing requirement of your stay in New Zealand. The condition that will be issued on the residence visa from the outset that requires you to maintain that investment and to make those investments and also to spend time in New Zealand will be removed, provided you have complied with the investment and time day count in New Zealand over the preceding 4 years. And then that's the trigger for you to obtain a permanent resident visa. There's monitoring requirements throughout the process, throughout that 4-year period. We will work with you and stay with you from the outset all the way through to the permanent resident visa stage. So we just make sure that that everything is correct, maintained, and you don't stray off the path, so to speak, so that you don't get to the end of the 4 years and find that you're not actually eligible and your visa may be cancelled. I think that's all I'm going to say for the time being. I'm going to hand over to Tim now to talk more in more detail about the investment aspect of the visa category. Thanks, Tim.
Thank you, Tony and Karen, for having me along to speak today. My colleague James and I, we have worked with investor migrants for the last decade, and James is actually from Birmingham himself. He arrived in New Zealand around about 15 years ago with a bag of clothes and on Noe. So we both have good experience of the changing visas and best ways in which to meet all the requirements. I thought firstly that I would start with a bit of a shameless promotional video. So as you can see, a very beautiful place to come and live on the other side of the planet. So who's Forsyth Barr? We're the largest private wealth managers in the country. We look after $30 billion in client assets spread across retail, charity, and some institution. James and I have a real focus on helping investor migrants arrive in the country, build a network, understand their ecosystem, and ensure that they make a decision that is in their best interest. We have 27 offices around the country and are very well supported by a really exceptional research team. Throughout this whole process, we can help you build a really clear picture of the best investment avenue in this new visa. So the Active Investor Plus visa has 4 investment pathways, which provide greater flexibility than the previous visa categories by allowing the applicant the ability to choose from a combination of investment options. As Karen mentioned, the visa criteria awards more active investment through a 3 times rated multiple for direct investment. So direct investment means investment into private unlisted New Zealand businesses. There is a 2 times weighting for managed funds. Managed funds are private equity and venture capital funds. In New Zealand, private equity is classed as being those companies that have between a $10 to $100 million per annum revenue. They're pre-IPO companies. Our private equity managers here generally have portfolios of 10 to 15 of these companies. Venture capital, on the other hand, is really early stage businesses, those that may have an idea and need some funding to get going, right up until seed stage. In New Zealand, we're a country of entrepreneurs. So there we have a lot of really good ideas, and due to the size of our country, we struggle to scale these internationally. So a really great thing to do when you're coming in under the investor migrant visa is to get to know the businesses, get to know who the main people are in your field of in your career, and then come in and help businesses scale internationally using your networks. As the decision around which pathway an applicant will take becomes much earlier in the visa application process, we believe that it's very important to work with you at a very early stage to understand your capacity for risk, your risk tolerance, and therefore your liquidity and income needs. Listed equity market in New Zealand is dominated by big industrial type companies, those that have probably reached the end of their growth period. They have monopolistic or duopolistic tendencies, and therefore return a lot of income throughout the life of your visa. The average income yield for our listed companies is around 5%, and the visa allows you to withdraw income throughout the life of your visa to pay for your trips here or your holidays around the country. Now, the thing with private markets is that the best investments are not always open. Therefore, we have worked with the New Zealand Trade and Enterprise, who are running this new investor scheme, to put our service on the NZT website and therefore an acceptable investment under the managed funds route. This allows you the time needed to understand the New Zealand ecosystem, build friendships and networks, and be comfortable with before making an investment into a private market. We call this the customized investment solutions. So under the service we've created, and as an example, an applicant may decide that they would like to invest in both listed equities and managed funds. We have 2 separate accounts where an AIP applicant has both their listed equities in one and the managed funds in the other. This approach reduces the complexity and ongoing management and supports the ability to clearly demonstrate to Immigration New Zealand the funds are allocated in respective asset classes. Once an applicant decides that they would like to go ahead with using Forsyth Barr, at the time of the agreement and with a managed funds mandate, all the requirements under the investor visa have been completed at that stage. So New Zealand Trade and Enterprise have understood exactly what we do in the background and are very happy that we will invest in a way that meets their requirements. So by signing up to the service that we provide, you have therefore met all the investment criteria. This allows you the time to make a really good decision around what it is exactly that you would like to invest in New Zealand. So here is our example with equities. Equities are committed and invested at the time they are purchased, and the managed funds account is invested at the time of entering into an agreement with Foresight Fire. Direct investments. We don't advise directly on direct investments as they are unlisted, but we have a very wide network of fund managers and private market specialists who can provide you with the due diligence needed to and a trusted network and peace of mind to ensure that you are making the right investment decision. This comes down to your liquidity needs. Private investments are not like listed markets where you're able to sell their investment easily. So it's very important to take your time to understand your liquidity requirements, what type of companies you would like to invest in, and therefore your payback period. So throughout the life of our relationship, we'll be able to provide you with specialist advice, support, and ensure that you make the best outcome possible when making your decision to come and live in New Zealand. Our job is to try and make it as easy as possible. Our service can be found on the NZT website, and you're able to do your own due diligence on the service that we provide. Excuse me. So I'll stop there, Tony. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. That's terrific. Let me just put up a screen here with our contact details on it. So there's contact details for myself and Karen, should anyone want to note them. Now we do have some questions. Let me run through those and we'll get you the answers if we can. So first of all, question for me about the Global Talent Program. So the question is, what if I apply for the Global Talent Program, but my application hasn't been finalised by the time that program's replaced with the new National Innovation Visa? Good question, and the answer is your application will go forward. The government will then assess it against the new requirements. But as I pointed out, we're not expecting the core requirements to change significantly. And so in most cases, we would say if you qualify for Global Talent, the likelihood is you'll also qualify for the National Innovation Visa. Okay, next question, Karen, this is one for you. Can I include my parents in the application for New Zealand and can they qualify for residence as well?
Good question. Thanks, Tony. We often get asked this question. The answer is essentially your parents cannot be included in the original investor application. They must apply on their own. They could apply with your support once you get to the end of the 4-year investment period. It's possible to sponsor, if you like, parents, or they can apply separately at the same time. Once you've got a residence visa, they can come through what we call parent retirement category, which requires an investment of $1 million for 4 years. But essentially, they can't be included in that original application, no.
Okay, thanks for that, Karen. Tim, I think this one's for you. What's the New Zealand tax treatment in terms of global earnings for 1, a resident, 2, a permanent resident, and 3, a citizen?
Karen, for the first 4 years under a new resident in a visa category, you have a transitional tax treatment. So for the first 4 years, you're not taxed on any of your global income. Once you become a New Zealand tax resident by living here for more than 183 days, your global income is caught in our tax brackets, and therefore you will need to pay tax in New Zealand. There are other tax considerations. So when looking to move to New Zealand full-time, it is, really advised that you speak to a tax specialist, especially if you hold major global interests.
Okay, thank you for that. The next question is somewhat related. How does permanent residence work in relation to tax residence? If I wish to stay a tax resident in my current country, am I limited in the number of days I can spend in New Zealand?
So typically it's 183 days. Anything over that, it becomes a little bit tricky. So you need to ensure that you firstly are not over that day, and that secondly, you don't become a habitual resident of New Zealand either. We have major tax treatments with a lot of countries globally, so you are able to pay tax here and potentially use it as a tax credit in your own country. But it is, as I said, it makes a lot of sense to ensure that you know all the different tax rules before becoming or taking part in this visa.
I'll just add to what Tim said, and it's important to note that being a resident for immigration purposes or a permanent resident is quite different and is treated completely differently to being a tax resident. So you can be a permanent resident visa holder and not be tax resident in New Zealand.
Okay, thank you both. This is a question about the Australian program, both the Global Talent Program and the new National Innovation Visa. How many days residence do they require? And for citizenship, does the requirement change as it does in the UK? So both the Global Talent Program and the new National Innovation Visa are direct to permanent residence. So there's no minimum stay period you require in order to obtain the visa. But once you have the visa, the first visa is valid for 5 years. At the end of that 5-year period, the travel part of the visa will expire and you need to apply for what's called a resident return visa, so you can travel in and out of Australia. And the length of that resident return visa is determined by how much time you spend in Australia. So if you spend more than 2 years of the first 5 years in Australia, you automatically get another 5-year resident return visa, and you can continue doing that every 5 years. If you spend less than 2 years out of the first 5, you can still extend the visa, but the government extends it a year at a time until you meet the requirement for a 5-year visa, or indeed if you have enough residents to apply for citizenship. Question here, are there non-investment options available for New Zealanders in New Zealand for health professionals? So I'm guessing that's other visa programs, Karen.
Yeah, there is. We have like most countries around the world, we've got a chronic shortage of health professionals. So most health professionals would be able to get residence straight away, provided they meet relevant registration requirements here, if that's appropriate. So for doctors registered with the Medical Council of New Zealand. But with a job offer here, you can apply under a straight to residence category, which will provide you with a resident visa with 2 years worth of the travel conditions, no investment requirement. And once you're here, if you spend 50% of your time in each of those first 2 one-year periods here, you will qualify for a permanent resident visa. So yeah, there are definitely pathways more around skilled employment that you can follow for health professionals, and some other various areas where New Zealand has deemed to be we're in critical shortage of.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries. Happy to talk to someone about that if you need.
Okay, the next question, is it possible to initiate a global talent independent application now, or do I need to wait for the new program? No, you can initiate that program now. The global talent is continuing until it's replaced by the new visa sometime later in the year. And so if you apply now, your application will just move ahead as normal. And we'd be very happy to give you some advice about whether you would qualify. Next question, can any assets, e.g. US government bonds or US listed stocks, be transferred to New Zealand and counted as part of the required investment?
I can take that one, Karen. So yes, we can accept US government bonds and US listed stocks to be transferred to our organisation, but they would need to be sold in order to become holding investments, or those investments that are deemed acceptable for this visa. So that includes government and local bonds, so New Zealand government and New Zealand local bonds, term deposits, or cash and a bank account. Our cash accounts at our firm track the official cash rate in New Zealand. So we've been working with the current clients that we work with. We hold their holding investments mainly in cash, which achieve around about 5.6% annual income rate at the moment with our high interest rates.
Thanks, Tim. Another Australia question is, in Australia, is there any possibility for airline pilots to qualify under the Global Talent Program? Unfortunately, no. Airline pilots don't fall into the 10 industry categories, but there are opportunities for airline pilots in Australia, and we do have a very large skilled program, and there are always occupations available. So again, if you want to send me some details, I'd be happy to point you in the right direction in that case. Next question, I presume, Karen, this is both for you and for me. With a resident visa, can I buy land, start a company, own a ranch, or is permanent residence visa necessary? Firstly, I could say for Australia, the Global Talent Program is a permanent visa. So once you've got permanent residence, there's no limit on what you can do in terms of purchasing property, land, houses, and so on, starting a company, owning a farm or a ranch, because you do have permanent residence. Slightly different in New Zealand, I believe, so I'll leave that for you, Karen, to answer.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, it's a bit of a minefield in New Zealand, unfortunately, at the moment. So if you have a resident visa or a permanent resident visa, you can purchase property, but you also must be usually resident here. So when you first are given your residence visa, you can live here, you can seek approval if you have not been here for a full 12 months. You can seek approval from our Overseas Investment Office to purchase a house or to live in. But once you become usually resident, along with your resident visa or permanent resident visa, then you can buy and sell property freely.
Great, thank you. Next question, what about IT professionals? I presume that's in relation to the Global Talent Program in Australia. Yes, definitely IT professionals can apply. We've done many applications under the program for very well qualified IT professionals. They fall into the Digitech group. And again, we'd be very happy to hear from you if you would like us to assess your eligibility. And then what looks like the final question, is it possible to invest and become a partner in an Australian business that falls under the listed areas? Definitely, yes. It depends on your background. There's no minimum investment amount required for you to make. But if you have a background in a particular area and you want to invest into a business in Australia that's operating in that space, in one of those 10 industry sectors, then yes, you could definitely look at the Global Talent Program. and potentially even more so under the new program. Once the National Innovation Visa and the details are announced, it may in fact be easier to make an application as an investor into an Australian business. Okay, next question. Do you need to invest in Australia and do you get a permanent residence or citizen, I presume? Obviously you joined a little late, sorry about that, but no, there's no investment required for the Australian program, and you do get permanent residence if you qualify. We'll be sending out copies of the recording of this webinar, so you'll be able to see how I covered that during the presentation. Okay. Oh, hang on a minute. One more question. In New Zealand, is New Zealand in need of qualified ski instructors from Switzerland?
That's
yeah, unfortunately not. We're always looking for an invite.
Don't they employ New Zealand ski instructors in Switzerland? Isn't it the other way around?
Yeah, I think it is. All of our instructors go. Yeah. There is a special visa, a temporary visa for ski sports, ski snow sports instructors and other specialist staff. So you can come and work for a season, depending on the type of job offer that you have, that could potentially lead to a resident visa without investment, but it's employment based rather than investment based.
Okay, great. And then this does look like the final question for you, Karen. Does the New Zealand program require you to rent versus buy property to live in?
If you are living here, if you move to New Zealand, then you would ultimately meet the usually resident test, and you could buy a property to live in. So that would be fine. You don't have to rent. You may need to or choose to rent to start with till you work out exactly where you want to live. But there should be no problem in purchasing a house going forward if you're living here.
But presumably the program itself doesn't require you to either rent or buy.
No, it doesn't. No, not at all. Yeah.
Okay, that looked like it was the last question. So if there is nothing else, I think we should probably wrap up the webinar. We've been running for just on an hour. As I mentioned a couple of times, the recording of this webinar will be made available to everybody who registered. That should go out in the coming days. Also, you have our contact details there on screen, and I think Tim provided some contacts as well. If not, we can pass those on if anyone is interested in contacting Tim. So it only leaves me to thank Karen and Tim, both of you, for getting up so early over there in New Zealand to join the webinar. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for everyone who attended. I hope you found it useful, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.